So today's lesson is going to be on conflict resolution and dealing with unexpected disruptions in your day. Welcome to our program on psychology today. I am Dr. Rabbi Griffin. Glad to be with you this morning. Sometimes we have to practice psychology and psychiatry on ourselves, preferably without medication. Glad to be with you this morning. It's been an interesting morning. We had a little bit of a conflict, speaking of conflict resolution, with technology. But, we're working through that. And my doctor says that I am, in fact, getting better. Glad to be with you this morning. Hope you guys are doing well. That was very interesting. We were doing a stream and it wasn't working. There was no video, but audio. And then I couldn't get it to stop. No matter what I did, no matter what button I pushed, it would not stop. And I had to turn the computer completely off. And then it still wasn't stopping. It was weird. It was like one of those movies where, the bad guy, you can't kill him. He just keeps showing up. And so here we are, but we're going to get this figured out. We're going to get it solved, as we say in French. But today we'll be talking about the tabernacle as it relates to the concept of forgiveness. And I forgive my computer. We have a love-hate relationship, mostly hate, but I do forgive it. Anyway, that's not about that. So quit interrupting me. So what I wanted to say was that a lot of people look at the law of Moses. One of the bad raps, if you will, the law of Moses gets is that there's no grace, there's no forgiveness. And of course, it's absurd. It's an absurd statement to make. It's very low IQ, very ignorant. And the reason is because built into the law of Moses is, of course, forgiveness and grace. It's actually part and parcel with the law itself. Ironically, when somebody, as we talked about yesterday, they challenge us and say, well, where's your temple whereby you could get forgiveness through the blood offerings? What's interesting about that is that by asking that question, which they mean it very, frankly, anti-Semitically, they mean it very, it's an arrogant thing to say that they're doing. That's kind of like a ha, who's your daddy? But when they say that, what they're actually admitting is that there was grace in Torah. There was a way in which to receive forgiveness in Torah. And by the way, the argument that they have is nonsensical, because they say, well, the temple is destroyed, so now you can't get forgiveness. But that wasn't the case when the Messiah was crucified. When the Messiah was crucified, the temple was still extant. In fact, it continued to exist for another 4 decades. Do you understand the problem with the argument? Therefore, is that if your argument is that you don't have the temple, so now you need Messiah. But wait a minute, we had the temple when Messiah was crucified, so your argument is anachronistic. But of course that's way over the head of most people. It's way, way too deep of a philosophical conversation to have. Suffice to say that within the law of Moses, there is, in fact, grace. And today we'll be looking at an insight from Me'am Loez to chapter 38 and verse 21, which is Parsha Pekudei begins. And he's going to be talking about this and kind of why it's called the testimony, or the tabernacle, rather, of testimony. Now, we're going to see that on the surface level, the Peshat level, that the testimony is, of course, the law of Moses. That's the testimony. That's why it's called the tabernacle of testimony. That's why it's the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of the Testimony. But we're going to look at this from a different point of view as well, that the testimony there is going to be a testimony to the forgiveness, the mercy, the kindness of God. And something else I should just mention, that's something, a holdover from yesterday, and that is that we also see that Judaism itself, one of the critiques that Judaism receives is that it's just a bunch of cold, hard, legalistic religion. That's also false. We pointed out yesterday that the alleged religion of grace is in fact a religion of legalism. In fact, somebody just sent me a notification yesterday. They were it was a situation where one of our members was letting a former Christian organization to which they had belonged. It was time to renew their, I guess, dues to that Christian organization. And so they let them know that they converted to Lapid Judaism and, thanks, but no thanks, wish you the best, et cetera, et cetera. And something to that effect. And the reply that they got back was, okay, but please know that since you've converted to Lapid Judaism, you've lost your salvation. You've turned your back on the grace of God. And it was interesting to read that because it was just further evidence of what I've said before, that Christianity is a legalistic religion, a very much a fear-mongering religion. To write somebody such a letter, you just think about how ridiculous that is. Somebody sent you, said, this is what I've done. A reasonable, responsible person might reply and say, well, I'm sorry to hear that. We would love to have you in our organization. I'd like to talk to you more about why you made this decision. If you really cared about somebody, that's kind of the conversation you want to have, as opposed to, you did what? You're going to hell for everlasting damnation. Just know that. Anyway, yeah, crazy, without even knowing anything, right? Good morning, Leah. Good to see you. Good morning, Daniel and Brenda and Donna and Micaiah and Kathy. Levi, thank you, sir. No stress. Good morning, Chris and Crystal. Good morning, Grace. By the way, I made a little joke. I was having a cough a day or two ago, and I said I was switching from unfiltered Camels to filtered Camel cigarettes. And somebody wrote in on the channel and chastised me for smoking or making a joke about smoking. And I thought to myself, that's out of that entire teaching, that's all you got. Good morning, Chris and Crystal. Good morning, Grace. Besides, I'm going to filtered cigarettes. I mean, it's cutting back. Good morning, Joseph, Samuel. Good morning, Greg and Sergio, Nellie Grace, Micaiah, Boker Tov, Nellie. No, I did say Nellie Grace. Good morning to Amita. Good morning to you. Shoshana, Kim, Gordon, Boker Tov to you, Gordon. Good morning to Michael and Rebecca. Who else do we have? Shoshana Brenner and Jean, good morning to you. Let's see. Did I miss Lantern Signals? Good morning. And Baruch HaShem. Bishop Kevin, good morning to you. Let's see. Did I miss any? Thelma, Boker Tov, glad to see you this morning. Hope you guys are doing good and being richly blessed. It is funny, the type of comments that people make, and I do have a sense of humor. Don't tell anybody. And some people don't pick up on the humor. That's because they don't have a sense of humor. But that's okay. That's okay. We're going to help them laugh anyway. All right, Baruch HaShem. Let's look at Ma'am Loez and the time that we have remaining, which is about 5 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. It says here, these are the accounts of the tabernacle, which were calculated at Moses' order by the Levites under Ithamar, son of Aaron the priest. Baruch HaShem. Sorry, Kathy. She's been out of the Christian church for a while, she says. And they sent her a text telling me that need to catch up on your tithes. I'm assuming she meant tithes and offerings. How are you? That's always great. Send somebody a message. Hey, I'd like to know if you could pay me some money. By the way, how are you doing? That's great. Love it. I've never felt so loved. So the tabernacle here is referred to as a tabernacle of testimony, he says. The tabernacle was a great testimony that God had reconciled with the Israelites and forgiven them for the sin of the golden calf. So this is the point that's going to be made predominantly in this inside, and that is that it's called the tabernacle testimony because it's the testimony that God had forgiven us for the sin of the golden calf. And indeed, the building of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, comes after the sin of the golden calf, which is telling us that God has a lot of forgiveness and grace for us. It says God demonstrated this by allowing his divine presence to rest among them. By the way, recently, another, I'm going to call it an argument. It's really an insult, but an argument that's been made against the Jewish people is we were constantly breaking the law. We were constantly failing, constantly, breaking it. And so the idea being is that finally, at some point, God just had enough. It's a bridge too far. And what I've tried to argue in response to this is basically, do you hear yourself? On the one hand, you're accusing the Jewish people of constantly breaking the law of Moses and failing to keep it or whatever. And so eventually, God's solution to that was taking it from us. Your religion preaches that you should openly rebel against the law of Moses, like out in the open. It says don't eat pork, so you eat pork. It says keep the Shabbat, so therefore you don't. It says, keep the holy days, and therefore you don't. In fact, you make up your own holy days. You don't make them up, excuse me. You go and take pagan days and make those your days. So it's like whatever God says do A and you do B. But you're going to point the finger at Israel and say that we were constantly blowing it. Now, do you see how that line of thinking is, I don't know, insane? But yet that's how people think. So if you take hold of the law of Moses and you try to keep it, but you make mistakes, then you're a wicked, evil person who is eligible for everlasting damnation in the lake of fire. But if you're somebody who openly rebels against the law of Moses and tells God to go pound sand, then you get to go to the celestial heavens when you die. That makes about as much sense as having a screen door on a submarine. Now, we continue and say, the nations of the world, Sergio, I say that, and then Sergio inserts his brilliance. If you don't try, you can't blow it. Perfect. Sergio, I did not think of it like that, but you're right. This is the ostrich theology. The ostrich theology is if I stick my head in the sand, they can't see me. If I don't try, I can't blow it. It's perfect. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. You should write a letter and we should canonize it and consider you a god. It's fantastic. So it says the nations of the world assumed that there would be no forgiveness for the sin of the golden calf. After all the good and many miracles that God had done for the Israelites, they had the audacity to rebel against him and make the golden calf. This is precisely the argument that's being made today, that there is no forgiveness for Israel. We blew it. We had the audacity, and he is never going to forgive us. Meanwhile, back at the Bat Cave, Johnny Gentile is completely ignoring the law of Moses as if it's none of God's business what he does, and God loves him for that. He doesn't like us because he gave us a law and we sinned. But he likes you because he gave you the law and you told him to go pound sand. So it says here, the nation said the Israelites have done such a terrible thing. How could God ever forgive them? And yet he did. In fact, we could also say that there are verses whereby Hashem says he will never abandon Israel. Not that the scripture ever mattered to anybody. I'm just kidding. But seriously, there are such verses, right? So it says, but then they saw that God commanded them to make a tabernacle, which would be a holy habitation, indicating that God wanted to rest his holy presence among them. It is thus written, they shall make me a sanctuary and I shall dwell among them. The nations saw that the divine presence had descended on the tabernacle. They saw a flame of fire surrounding it. The nations then realized that God had reconciled himself with Israel and had forgiven them for the sin of the golden calf. Okay. It says this can be understood through a parable. A king married an impoverished woman who had no property whatsoever. He did great kindness to her, showed her much love, and granted her great honor. One day the king heard a very bad report about this woman, and he became very angry with her and rid himself of her. He would not come near her again. The woman's neighbor said to her, you have no hope. There's no chance that you will ever be reconciled to the king. After all the good that he did for you, you have the audacity to rebel against him. Now, after a few days, however, the king sent word ordering his wife to clean out the house and to straighten and make the beds. He did this because he wanted to see her. The neighbors laughed. How is it possible that the king should return should turn around rather and want to come to her? The king came to her privately and reconciled himself with her. He ate with her and drank with her, but the neighbors did not believe that the king was intimate with her. Later, however, they smelled the perfumes coming from the palace, and they believed that the king was with her and had forgiven her her transgressions. The same is true of the Israelites. God had taken them out of Egypt and had honored them more than all the other nations of the world. He had brought them to Mount Sinai and had given them the Holy Torah. He had granted them great honor, calling them a kingdom of priests. God thus said, you shall be to me a kingdom of priests. Still, not even 40 days had elapsed before they rebelled and made the golden calf. By the way, the kingdom of priests comes from Exodus 19. If you look at Exodus 19, 1 through 6, this tells us, is one of the places where God tells us why he's given the law of Moses. And it has nothing to do with sin or so that sin can abound or so that we can know what big bad sinners we're going to be. It's not at all why he says that. Okay. It says the nation said, what hope is there that he will ever come back and forgive them after the sin of the golden calf? You know, God said you're going to be for me a kingdom of priests, and this is going to be amazing. And then you sin with the golden calf. And so from the nation's point of view, that it would make sense that God would never forgive you for such a heinous act. Now, this is because the nations don't really understand the nature of God. And here I'm not talking about just forgiveness. The nations don't understand the nature of God. Understand that when God called Abraham, much less the Jewish people, but certainly the Jewish people as a whole, he's God. He sees the end from the beginning. He knows the future. I mean, if prophets know the future, from where do they get their prophecy? From God. In other words, when God called Israel to be his Am Segula, his cherished people, he already knew that they were going to sin with a golden calf. And this is a life lesson for you and I, friends, that when God called you to his service, he already knew all the errors you have made and that you will ever make. He called you, you could say, possibly in spite of that. Some might say he called you because of that. What? He called me because I was going to blow it? Sure. Because everybody knows that no one is ever truly successful unless they've had failure in their life. That's what makes great people great, actually. And so, and the reason is because we learn from that. There's a whole lesson. I've taught on it before. When we talk about the episode of the golden calf and the scripture, this is talked about at length. But see, from the Gentile, from the uncircumcised Gentile mind, they're looking at God like they look at themselves, that they don't know everything. And so their idea is, well, I called you, you failed me, off with your head. But see, they're not God. See, God knew they were going to do that. And he also knew that golden calf incident was going to positively affect Israel for the rest of the generations. This very day, to give you an example, one example, to this very day, we do not wear gold jewelry during Yom Kippur, specifically because of the golden calf incident. Now you think about that. In the year 2025, we still are impacted by the sin of the golden calf to the extent that we don't wear gold jewelry on Yom Kippur. That's the positive impact that we have had. That's right. Chris and Crystal, we grow from adversity. That's right. If I go to the gym and I work out, I'm not talking here about injuries, but if I go to the gym and I work out, and if I'm not sore the next day or two, then I feel like I kind of wasted my time. I'm not talking about injuries. I'm not talking about hurting yourself. That's not what I mean. But if you don't have that muscle soreness, muscle tenderness after having gone to the gym, in my opinion, okay, then you're wasting your time. You're going there and you're I don't know what you're doing, but you're going through some jazzercise stuff or something, I guess. But adversity is what grows us. And a lot of people, by the way, want to avoid adversity, and understandably so. I'm not going to sit here and say I love adversity. This morning when I had all that technical adversity, that was fun. No, it wasn't. It was irritating. There's a large part of me that just want to say, no Aliyah today. I guess we're going to go do something else. But you have to press through it and work through it. And that's what it was. The golden calf was that adversity for the people of Israel. And the nations thought it was over. And that's because this goes back to, we talk about the legalism of Christianity, the fear-mongering of Christianity. Where does that come from? Well, what we're seeing is it comes from the uncircumcised mind. Their heart is not circumcised because the heart is the mind. And the mindset is, I have an angry God, and when I fail, he comes down like a hammer. That's not the Jewish way of thinking. Jews don't think that way. We don't look at God as this ogre who's just waiting to hit us with a battle axe if we make a mistake. We look at God and say he's ever ready to forgive us. He wants to be in relationship with us. It says, when Moses prayed that God would forgive them, God was reconciled and said, I have forgiven according to your word. Numbers 14 and verse 20. Moses said, Lord of the universe, I know that you have forgiven them, but I want you to make a sign to show to the nations of the world. And God said, by your life, I will make a great sign, and the nations shall know that I have forgiven them. Go make me a sanctuary, make my divine presence rest among them. From this, everyone will know clearly that I have forgiven them for the sin of the golden calf. Now, God also commanded that the first thing brought should be gold. It is thus written, this is the offering that you shall bring of them, gold, silver, and copper. This is meant to teach the nations of the world that the true Israelites had no portion in the gold that was given for the golden calf. It had all come from the mixed multitude. That's one of the opinions. And I don't believe that, by the way. The mixed multitude was a very small number of people, about 3,000. And one of the reasons I don't like to blame the mixed multitude, which you'll see a lot in rabbinic literature, blaming the mixed multitude. They made me do it. I am not a fan of blaming others for my problems. I'm not a fan at all. I think of the victim mindset, which has been. I think it's going by the wayside now, but over the last 4, 5, 6 years has been extremely prevalent in our culture. I'm this way because of this, that, or the other. No, you're not. You're that way because you choose to be that way. You've allowed the negative adversity in your life to make you that way. Okay. And where did you have we all, by the way, had negative experiences? Sure. Are some worse than others? Yeah. But then again, some are worse than others in different ways. You might have had a worse experience than I have had in this category, but I assure you there is some stuff in my life that was way worse than you've ever had to go through in another category. And so the point being is that we have to take personal responsibility for our own actions and say, okay, I was raised in a garbage home, and my mama and my daddy were garbage. And this is hypothetical. They were garbage, and my family unit was garbage, and the school I went to was garbage, and my street was garbage, and I ate garbage, and blah blah blah. Well, that's not why you're having a bad life. Okay, you're having a bad life because you allowed those instances to influence you negative instead of learning from them. That's, at the end of the day, it's your fault, right? And so this is something else. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, by the way, because it's much easier to hear that it's somebody else's fault. You're the victim of something else. But that would be lying to you, and would not be making you into a great person. It would be making you into a victim. And that's not where you want to live. We have to live a result-oriented life. Our life should be based not on good intentions, but on results. So I had the intentions to do this. That's great. That's sweet. That's nice. And by the way, utterly meaningless. What really matters is what you did. What did you actually accomplish? Not what you intended to accomplish, but what you did accomplish. So when we start holding ourselves accountable and living that way, we'll see a lot better, results in our life. That's how successful people live. Successful people do not live as victims. They're not, they don't sit around and go, well, I could be this way, I could be that if it wasn't for my mommy and my daddy. That's not how successful people live. So going back to the mixed multitude, this is relevant to the mixed multitude. Leah, as Bob Hart said, stop it. That right there is the greatest psychological therapy of all time. Stop it. Do you do that? Yeah, stop it. I love it. But we can't blame the mixed multitude. And whoever the mixed multitude is in your life, stop blaming them. And you'll be much happier. The vast majority of people are not going to follow my advice, by the way. You go back to the gym analogy. Most people want to go to the gym and just kind of, stretch. Few people want to actually work hard. That's the vast majority. That's why the vast majority of people are not successful, because they don't want to put in the effort. That's the whole point. So anyway, we don't blame the mixed multitude. But is it true that the vast majority of people did not get involved in the golden calf? That's true. But we all suffered for it, right? Why? Because we're all a unit, as it were. So it goes on to say here, Mam Loez, this can be likened to the following example. There were evil rumors about the wife of the king that she had sinned with one of the high people of the kingdom. The king investigated the matter carefully and found out that his wife had done nothing wrong. In order to publicize the fact that there was no basis for the rumor, the king made a great feast, invited all the important people in the kingdom. Among those invited was the minister who had been rumored to have had sin with the king's wife. This minister was placed at the head table. From this, all the people could see that the rumor was completely false. The same was true of the golden calf. The nation said that the Israelites had made the golden calf. God therefore commanded them that when bringing donations for the tabernacle, they should bring the gold first. This was to indicate that the gold with which the calf was made did not belong to the Israelites, but had actually come from the mixed multitude. This is alluded to when the Torah speaks of the tabernacle as the tabernacle of testimony. The tabernacle existed as a testimony that God had forgiven the Israelites for the sin of the golden calf. So this is really interesting too, because again, going back to the argument that, well, you don't have the temple anymore, and the temple was a place where you could get forgiveness of sins, and it no longer exists. You see, the reality is that the tabernacle, the temple, was a symbol itself that God had forgiven the people of Israel. And this is why it was destroyed, because in rebelling against God and rebelling against the law of Moses, God destroyed the temple to show that they had treated his forgiveness with ingratitude. That was the whole point. But it's interesting that do you think, let me ask you this question. Do you think that people who belong to the false gospel message, do you think that they look at the temple as a symbol of forgiveness? A symbol of God's charity? I would venture to, my opinion would be no, they don't. They would look at the temple as some type of like drudgery. They have to go there. And that's not it at all. It was a very, very deeply holy place. The reason why you see Jewish people who gather at the Kotel, at the so-called Wailing Wall, by the thousands, men and women, they're there because we long for the temple of God, because we long for the presence of God in our life. That's why they're there. They're there to draw near to Hashem. They're there to experience the grace of God. You see, from the Jewish point of view, when the temple is reestablished, maybe soon in our time, that will be the greatest sign of God's mercy. As it says in the Amidah, may my eyes see your return to Zion. Why? Because the establishment of the temple is the establishment of God's grace and mercy to us. That's why we long for it so much. It's a symbol of God's grace and a symbol of God's kindness. And that's what it means to have the tabernacle of testimony. It means to have the testimony of God's grace and kindness in our life. Indeed, that's what the Torah itself means. The Torah itself is a testimony of God's kindness and mercy. We were given the Torah after the Exodus, after we were saved from Egypt by the blood of the Lamb, and therefore the Torah was a testimony to us that we had become the people of God, that we had become God's priests and God's kings. It was a testimony that he had taken us to himself as his own people. And that's why the law of Moses is so precious. And that's why the Jewish people will never get rid of it. That's why that a gospel that says that the Messiah came to rid us of the Torah is a non-starter. Because that would mean that the Messiah came to to strip grace from us. And of course, that's not what people who say that's not what they mean. They don't know what they mean because they don't know what they don't know. But that's why we are here. End of our Aliyah today. Thank you so much for being a part of the program today. Sorry for all the trouble we had and the late start. Going to get that rectified, God willing, as soon as possible. God bless you. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, have a great and amazing day. Shalom Aleichem.